You're grinding every day. Long hours, no backup, no accountability. That ends now. The Empower Solopreneur Mastermind gives you one simple advantage, a weekly power session that turns isolation into domination. Every Friday morning on Zoom, you'll get real coaching and real feedback to make real moves. Join a group of driven professionals in a program designed for solopreneurs and people working at home. Stop getting stuck. Start scaling. Seats are limited. Lock in yours today at modernobserver.com/empower-mastermind.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. I am smiling today because I am here with my partner in World Empowerment, Jan Jeremias, and we're going to have a very nice conversation. I'm going to start off by saying, Jan, thank you for sending me the picture of the fully lighted menorah. It was very, very empowering.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it.
I loved it, as a matter of fact. This is a particularly special time for me and for my family because we're not close in proximity to each other. So we've done a few things to kind of go out of our way, to sort of take care of each other during this period of time. And, it can be a little on the commercial side if you let it. But what we've done is we've kind of put limits on our generosity, if you will, because first of all, I have to say this again. I know we've been saying this for every Christmas for the last 5. My wife and I don't get each other Christmas presents because we celebrate Christmas every day. And if there's something that we truly want in our lives that we both agree is good for us and enjoyable and brings us smile and warm feelings, we just do it. It's not about the season for getting and giving, in our opinion, unless you're talking about love and forgiveness and understanding and a whole lot of other things that have to do with people and not things, if you will. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's sort of like Thanksgiving, which I love anyway, but I think it's a practice you do every day. It's not a practice you do one day a year.
Yes. Yeah, there's a profound opportunity to really get lost in this season as opposed to being melancholy. And that's to take a few minutes and really appreciate the whole tradition of Scripture. And the really interesting part of all of that is that the entire story of what Christmas is about and what it means for mankind, for those who believe, is very powerful and it's very short. It does not take a long time to tell the Christmas story. Just as it does not take a long time to tell the Hanukkah story, right? However, they're both billion-dollar enterprises, which is kind of interesting. So I guess the way to a man's pocketbook is through his spirituality.
I'm not going to go there. I'll avoid that one. But yeah, I mean, I think, if you look at like movies or books about the holidays, and they were much more about what people could do for each other. Like gifts that always held meaning, like true meaning for people. If you were giving something that was of monetary value, it was something that was going to impact someone's life in some way.
Right.
And it wasn't something that just another object to have or something like that. It was much more symbolic and, I don't know, had much more meaning for people, even if you go back and you start to go through, I don't know. I mean, I think of the gifts that I got through the years and, which ones meant a lot. I still have some of the I still have some gifts that I got, like, which kind of, I remember how excited I was when I got them, you know?
Yeah. Well, let me see if I get what you're talking about. Our, our first Christmas together, Janet and mine, we had met in October at a University of Connecticut dormitory party. So our very first Christmas together, we spent at her parents' home. I'm not sure they really appreciated that I was there with their daughter, for a weekend. Uh, it wound up being 4 or 5 days because neither one of us had classes to go to. We're on, Christmas break as they, or semester break as they called it. However, when we went shopping for each other that first year, our presents for each other were very, very simple. She bought me this 20-ounce coffee cup that was handmade, brown and tan with blue round circles that kind of look like blueberries. And without me even knowing, at the same place, this was in the Hoot on Main Street in Willimantic back in the day, still in business, which is fantastic. I bought her one with these cute little owls on it, a larger owl and a smaller owl. That was 51 years ago. 51 years ago. We still have them.
Mhm.
They've been through countless thousands of dishwashings, Now we have a lot of other coffee mugs that we use all the time, but those are still here. And I still can presence the feeling that I had for her that first Christmas. Now we bought each other a couple other small things. It wasn't big because neither one of us had any money. We barely could rub two sticks together to come up with our security deposit for the apartment that we were going to move in, which was $85 security deposit at first month. So it was a lot of money for us. And I still get that feeling in my stomach and in my chest and in my heart, actually in my whole body, of just the two of us. First, she opened up her gift from me. And she looks at this coffee mug and she holds it up and she turns it around and she says, "Those are the cutest owls, And I said, "Yeah, that's really great." I said, "I was hoping you'd really like the idea of a coffee mug. This is, I think, the first thing that I bought you." And so she said, "Well, we'll just see." Of course, it got to be my turn to open up my gift, and I'll be darned if it's not a bigger version of a coffee mug, that's more suited to me. I'm 6'4" and all that. And long story short, every time we've used those, we've had many occasions where the two of us will comment about what an interesting coincidence that that's what we bought for each other for our first Christmas presents. It wasn't like either one of us cut our hair off, to buy the other one the combs or whatever it was we thought that the other person really need. But I think her parents actually, understood and got the message that the two of us were really, really working on something very important for us.
Mm. Nice. Well, you'll laugh at my first like one of the presents I remember, and the fact that I still have it is kind of. So I remembered I was 13 years old. Well, was I won't say what year it was in, but it was in the late 1970s or something, and I got a blow dryer. I was
Right.
so excited. A Conair blow dryer. I still have that blow dryer. It is at my mom's house. I
Wow.
use it. I use it every time I go. It still works.
It's amazing.
One is that it's a tribute to kind of like the way I care for things. which, you know, I think is that, but it was also like, I remember it was a very big deal at that time. I mean, it wasn't, you know, so yeah, but it makes me smile now because first of all, to think that I still have it, two is that how excited I got by a blow dryer.
Well, there were times back in in the early days when they were not engineering things to die after a year or two.
Right, exactly.
Fantastic. So I was thinking about our conversation today, and I came across a meme. As you know, I'm a devout Facebook follower. I spend a lot of time posting on people's pages, wishing them well, wishing their families well. But I came across a meme that I think is really, really cool. Now, it's not important if this is really true. I'd actually like it more if it were just plain made up, but it's called the 5 Ancient Japanese Rules That Make Life Peaceful. So with that in mind, thinking about what we're talking about today, and what really makes an awful lot of difference for people is I'm going to read them, and then we can chat a little bit about what they mean and all that. So sometimes that has really strange effect on the universe, when you start talking about peaceful. But the first one is called Ikigai, spelled Ikigai. Okay. And this is called having a reason to wake up. Purpose gives life direction and joy. Even small meaning creates big peace. Okay. So when you're waking up, you're not waking up into well, let's see what happens today, like expecting the next bad thing or whatever. But there's some small thing, like you can't wait to get out of bed so you can go water your basil, or you can't wait to go look for your puppy, or you can't wait to go see what you have received for emails from loved ones over the night. Does that make sense? But there's something that you're waking up to accomplish in the very first minutes. For me, sometimes it's just waking up and drinking my liquid vitamins in the first 15 minutes that I'm up, or just a glass of water. And then I use that as the time to kind of like reconstitute myself for the day. So have a reason to wake up, and even a small meaning creates a big peace.
I mean, from what I understand, because I actually spoke about this on Friday, it's also bringing the aspect of the extraordinary to the ordinary.
Yes.
It's thinking about the ordinary things in your life and literally making them extraordinary, like really appreciating and looking at with this element of awe, like the different things that maybe you take for granted every day, because it gives your life meaning.
Yes.
Beyond the stuff that tends to occupy our existence.
Yeah, I like the sound of all of that, and that the meaning that I'm hearing in what you're talking about is like a congruence or a relationship over time between how the days string together, and it's not where you're going to be buffeted around by the events of the day, but there is actually a purpose that you have on this earth, and that seems to make some sense to you. And there are times when I wake up at 3:30 in the morning or 2:30 in the morning, and I must get out of bed because I'm so excited about what I'm working on, and I can't wait to get back to it. So I think, that's kind of a neat thing. And as you're saying, if you can find miracles in the mundane, then that gives you the opportunity to generate so much more power in your life and to come from a place of peacefulness, it seems.
No, and it was by Donna Ashworth, who I like.
So any more thoughts on Ikigai?
No, I want to hear the rest. So we'll go on and probably have something to say about those.
I'm pretty much hoping you will. But I will say this about Ikigai, and that is that so many people are significance fiends, or profundity fiends, where things really have to be amazing, in order for them to be interested in participating or whatever. And it's like, you ever stop for a moment and just watch a butterfly that's sitting on the top of a flower slowly move its wings back and forth? It's not flying, but it's so engaged in what it's doing on the flower, either getting nectar or pollen or whatever it's doing, that it just has this little motion to it. It's really quite amazing. So, again, small meaning creates big peace. The next one, I love this because it reminds me of sushi. Wabi sabi. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
And this one is about accepting and embracing imperfection. Beauty lives in the flawed and the unfinished. Perfectionism destroys happiness. I love this one. And what it brings about for me is there is a statue, I believe it's by Rodin, but not Rodin, somebody else, but it's this sculptor with a hammer and chisel actually creating an image of himself. And what the sculpture is doing is it's breaking up the stone, and you can see the arms, the head, the shoulders, down to the waist, and the rest of it is all stone that's waiting to be chipped away. And it just kind of like reminds me that unfinished sometimes leaves an opportunity to have questions, right? Where finish gives you an answer, and there's not much more to go on there. It's not much more, and then time goes by and the answer that you got long ago is no longer good. It's no longer true. Culture's changed it. Science has changed it, or people talking has changed it. So accept imperfection.
Man, I mean, first of all, I love it because there's room for evolution. Because I think what ends up happening is when you figure something is, let's say, complete, even if it's imperfect, it's almost like even if the opportunity arises, you're like in your mind, well, this is done already.
Yes.
And there's no space. So you have to give it, for change to happen, you have to give it space.
I love that. And I also love it. You map this onto how many people over my lifetime have regarded the odd persons, the misfits, and when you start to learn that life doesn't exist like a TV show where everybody operates in a particular way and they have a particular amount of intellect or IQ and all these other things, how people say things that are amazing and astounding all the time. No, life is in the mispronouncing of words. Life is in the forgetting what you wanted to say at the beginning of the sentence by the time you get midway through the sentence and then having to go back. What the hell am I talking about? It's about the opportunity to live in a world where things can imply what comes next, but not tell you completely. The perfection of being imperfect, if you will.
Yeah. And I think that the other thing that it opens the door up for is compassion and understanding. Because I think when you look at things that are, people acting imperfectly,
Yeah.
then there's very little space for those, even if people act perfectly at some point, for points, but if you are looking for that, there's no room for compassion for the time when they're not.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what it brings to mind to me, is it opens the door for compassion and understanding in conversation.
Yeah. And maybe some recognition. Each of us has an area that we're not quite finished, or maybe we're far from perfect. That would apply to most of me.
Me too.
So having kind of the grace to not only embrace but empower the lack of perfection. So then the third concept is Kaizen. So Kaizen, this is in manufacturing, we use this approach, and the idea was each time better than the last. It was the interpretation that I learned of the Japanese word. Improve a little bit every day. Tiny progress becomes transformation. Consistency beats intensity. So a lot of effort over a short period of time doesn't necessarily change anything in a lasting way. However, small things that are adopted and continually practiced as small things going forward become habits. Those habits, produce predictability, and they also produce an openness to look and what I call playing heads up ball. You can do this in life, that each day you're going to focus on creating some small new change and benefit that's part of your lifetime goal, that's part of really what you're up to and why you say you're here on this planet.
And I
So
first of all, just want to just to say that they all like notice as you're saying them, and I'm noticing, but I notice more than this when we're on conversation is how they're all connected. Like how each one, I mean, this whole idea of, let's say, little by little, a little becomes a lot, which is a phrase that Eric Zimmer says a lot, and on his podcast and in his new book. And but also it's this idea of making room for that imperfection, because there will be times where you probably will falter and you will feel like you're moving backward as opposed to forward, even though you're making little steps. And you've got to realize that, kind of realize that that's going to happen. And that's okay, because I think what ends up happening is if we think we're going to be perfect, first of all, um, I feel like I could get a doctorate in this. If we think we're going to be perfect every time, or that we're going to succeed every time if we're trying to change something, first of all, when we're not, we get totally discouraged, and most of the time you give up because there's no space for any grace, compassion, for imperfection, for understanding. If you also have this feeling, and then you also go down the whole, like, I'm gonna, self criticism and self berating and everything like that because you haven't succeeded. And so not only do you not do it, or you may, let's say you're like you don't do something you want to do towards your little goal or whatever, towards your goal, but then you make it even worse by beating yourself up about it. So, yeah.
I like that approach. And that was also something while we were in manufacturing, we always looked at the failures as this investment in learning, okay? That each time something doesn't go the way that we intend, or it dramatically doesn't go the way it was designed, it's not like feeling bad that it didn't work. In our thinking, the worst thing that can possibly have is to have the damn thing work completely the first time and you don't know why. It's the little failures that lead to the big lasting success. And I always like to think of the lore about Thomas Edison doing 1,000 experiments on filaments before he got the first light bulb that actually lasted for a period of time is worth talking about. But I think along those lines, if we just take every day and look at it from what grants us peace, what grants us the ability to be without pressure or without external, what we call external, which those of us who spend some time looking into it, ain't nothing out there that's putting any pressure on us at all. It's our own concerns. It's our own mental processing. And Kaizen gives you like this really nice place to stand. Like, no matter what happens today, my intention is that I do better this time than last. Or, a little by little adds up to a lot, that sort of a thing. It gives you an opportunity to be grounded and peaceful and balanced. And I think really what we're talking about here is looking at the world not as like these monumental big things, but every big thing is made up of a whole ton of little small things.
Mhm.
And all of those being executed perfectly isn't um, isn't the goal. If you didn't learn anything about it, by getting it perfect, what'd you get out of that? It's called an accident, and it's a happy accident at that. But along the same lines, this is an opportunity for things to be done with a centering and with a peaceful approach, with the idea that every time you do something, it's a little bit better, it's a little bit more appropriate, and you understand what is present when it's working, and you understand what was missing when it wasn't.
I think the other thing that happens is the fact that, okay, we decide we're going to make a change, you know, or you're going to give up smoking, and you look at that day you gave up smoking, as that's the, like, people will say this, well, I gave up smoking on this exact day, because those kinds of things you remember, it's the kind of thing where you're sitting there and it's kind of imprinted in your mind. I remember I don't remember the date, but I remember the last can of diet soda I had and where I was, once I gave up like that kind of, junk or whatever, and I don't put it in my body anymore. But I remember that. But it was a lot that led up to that point. It wasn't like all of a sudden there was so many contributing factors before you make those types of decisions. You might have tried 1,000 times before. You might have all of a sudden the pieces, so like there was a triggering event that happened, but there were probably a lot of other triggering events. And I think we forget, like in our minds, or when someone does something or says that too, we forget all the steps that went along the way.
Yes.
All the days before, where, you know, which contributed to you being able to say, okay, I'm going to give up smoking, or I'm not going to have that drink, or I'm going to, I'm going to start to exercise, or whatever it is. But there was a lot that led up to that.
Yeah. Yeah. You're spot on. I started smoking casually in high school after, football games on Saturday night. We would all get together at the Norwich New London Drive-In. Row 13, as a matter of fact. So all of the teams in the area, Norwich, Ledyard, Fitch and Groton, St. Bernard's. So there were probably maybe 5 or 6 different schools in the area that would just show up there every Saturday night after football games. And so the interesting part of that was maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 cigarettes a month kind of a deal. And then from there, I started smoking pretty regularly in college. And by the time I met my wife, I was probably maybe a half a pack a day. Well, fast forward into my first job, when I became a supervisor and then became a manager by the time I was 25 years old, I was burning 3 packs a day. And it wasn't expensive. I think it was like 35 cents a pack back in those days, which was a lot of money, really. However, when I got to be 28 years old, I decided I was 27, and I decided I was going to apply for life insurance, because now I had 2 daughters. I had, my beautiful wife. I had a home. I wanted to make sure these things would be taken care of and secure. So a week before my birthday, I stopped smoking. I crushed up whatever was left in my last hard pack of Marlboros, and I threw it in the trash compactor. And I said, I'm done. I'm an ex-smoker. the next day, I went in to fill out my application for a $600,000 policy of life insurance, which was a lot of money back in those days, not quite so much now. But I went in the next day, and when I got to that question, are you a smoker, is what it said. It didn't ask, have you used, tobacco products in the past or anything like that. It said, are you a smoker? I said, no, I am not. Don't mind you, this is the day after. And you know how many cigarettes I had after that? Zero. I never had a single one. And being my word was, I don't know why, but it was very important to me for me to keep my word. And so I just never did. And oh, by the way, I went from, hacking in the mirror first thing in the morning every day where I couldn't catch my breath, or being over at a family gathering where all of us were smoking, and then somebody starts laughing, and the next thing you know, we're hysterically laughing, and then we can't catch our breath and we're gagging, and it's horrible. It's the most horrible thing on the planet. And so, yes, when you say that people who quit remember when and where, I can remember it. Now, the lead up to it, which is what I really thought was interesting. My dad and I had quit like 3 different times. And it wasn't really linked to anything. We both heard about this guy that did hypnotism down in Groton. So we went and saw what we called the Swami, and had him, put us through this rigor of hypnotizing us, and that didn't work. But finally, do you know what worked? The chunking it down to the small things, although I didn't know I was doing that. But somebody had told me how they quit was they just kept saying, they kept making a decision every time they wanted to have a cigarette. And it's a compelling urge. I got to tell you, it's almost like the urge to breathe. They would say, nope, I just won't have this cigarette. I won't have this one. I won't buy a pack. I won't light it up now, even though I really want to. And then almost magically that urge passes away and goes away. So, for years I dreamt about smoking cigarettes in my, in my sleep, or, I'd be in a room full of all sorts of other people that were smoking. And it almost made me sick to my stomach, the smoke in the air, because it wasn't cool for me anymore, But I think the really neat part of that was I needed to have a compelling reason to do something that's really small. And my family was enough reason for me, looking out for their, well, the other thing that I heard too was, if I found out that afterwards, if it were determined that I had lied on my application for life insurance, no matter how much money I paid them, but if I died and it was a contributing factor, then they wouldn't pay. So, that was the gun to my head. But I really forgot about that. And it just got to the point where I have this little anniversary. I was 28 years old, 1 week before my 28th birthday. And here's the neat part of it. So my dad and I had quit maybe 3 or 4 times over a couple of years. And when I quit altogether, I told him what I did. And he said, I'm going to do that. And he did. About 6 months after I quit, he quit. That's how he got to be 1 month shy of 89 years old in a family that all passed away by the time they were 66. That was the family heritage.
Well, one of the things that you just and I think that, in a way I think sometimes it goes to show you that one is if you have a compelling reason, and usually it's something like you talked about. You want to, you're doing it for somebody else. You're doing it for yourself on a very, very kind of deep level. And, I made that joke about giving up diet soda, but I mean, I was really addicted, and just like any addiction. And I remember literally standing there in a parking lot in my car. And I was like, oh my God, it took so much self-control not to go in and buy a can. But I was very much like, I remember having the cans at home and saying, okay, when I'm done with these, I'm not buying more. And and to this day, I don't really miss it. But every now and then, I mean, it's been probably, I don't even know, over 25 years. But to this day, when I eat certain foods, I'll be like, "Ah, I would really love to have a Coke, like a Diet Coke with this. I'd really love to have a Diet Coke. Pizza is one, like there's just something about, so there are certain foods that'll like bring it up in me and whatever. And it might sound odd to people, but it wasn't healthy. And I was trying to be more healthy and I had medical reasons. And so I was like, okay, but I remember, and I say compelling reason. My mother was a smoker from the time she was like 16 or 15, and she quit when she was in her 30s,
Right.
early 30s. And she used to say that she realized that she could never tell us not to smoke if she smoked. Like she felt like, she couldn't really say that. Like, so she decided to quit because she didn't want us to smoke.
Yeah. That that's a powerful thing when somebody decides they're going to set an example for someone else. Now, mind you, I didn't quit so that my father would quit. They were independent. We just
Right.
kind of shared with each other. And then when he said, "You know what?" He said, "You're doing okay with that." He said, you're not struggling with it this time." Because for me, at that age, whenever I went out to dinner and had a cocktail or were out with the guys playing pool over at the French club or something of that nature, yeah, there was a natural thing to smoke. Plus, in those days, everybody smoked everywhere at work. I mean, in church, in the hall, everyone smoked. There was just no. And then all of a sudden, we had the legislation that had to be removed from the workplace because of the obvious issues with secondhand smoke. So it's what's interesting about this too is we're getting to this conversation by talking about improving a little every day.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like this event when the last straw is enough to break the camel's back.
Mm-hmm.
And the neat part of it is that if you're working intentionally, you don't even have to know how many straws you put on the camel's back. All you have to do is just say, geez, this is who I am now. This
Right.
is how it operates.
But I think what's good is to acknowledge, like to sit there and realize, to me, there's this realization that comes is I don't have to know exactly what led up to it,
Right.
but the realization that a lot went into it, partly because then I think that, then we give ourselves credit where credit is due to realize the strength that it took to, you know, to not smoke or to do whatever else or to do something that I think we give our not a boastful way, but in this kind of acknowledging ourselves for something that we accomplished
Yes.
that took um a lot of work for us, and I don't think we have to remember every single time and we're probably never going to remember every single time that, you know, it led up to that, whatever that event was.
Right.
But it is, I think, worthwhile to acknowledge it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think again, if you're in that kind of let's learn from what worked and what didn't work, those small little knowing, yes, this did work, okay? Or wow, I'm impressed that I made it through that situation. I was completely stressed out by something that was happening at work at the same time that I had all this stress coming from family and finance and all that kind of stuff. And I chose not to do it. Good on me. I mean, we're not going to throw a party or anything or see if there's anybody who wants to do a ticker tape parade, but the acknowledging of that allows you to complete it, have it disappear and move on. It's not a big deal, but it is a deal, right? A little deal. in keeping up with, by golly, these things really do bring you an opportunity to have more peace in your life. There's no longer stress as to I should be quitting smoking. I do know it's bad for me, and I do know it's bad for my children and family. So I think that, what we've seen so far, there's a lot of emphasis on little. And here's another one. The fourth ancient Japanese rule that makes life peaceful it's called shikata ganai. And that is Let go of what you can't control. Acceptance reduces suffering instantly. Some things must be released, not solved. And I can still remember um, being very, very stressed out and concerned in my first supervising job. I thought it was my responsibility to worry about everything. And my vice president of manufacturing that I reported to, he came up to me one day and he said, "Hey, Bill, you know what? You can lighten up just a hair, right? I really appreciate how much you care. Everybody gets it, right?" He said, "But here's the thing. It's clear that you are concerned about outcomes." And he said, I'm concerned that that may take your eye off the ball in terms of execution. I want to see if I can give you a tool to like make it easier for you to get through these difficult things where you feel, that the failure in the outcome is going to do away with all of the good things that have happened up to now. In manufacturing also, and also in supervision, there was this old saying that here's an attaboy for you. It was a slip of paper and it said, "Here's an attaboy for you. 1,000 attaboys makes you a leader of men. One aw shit sets you back to zero again." So, I mean, that kind of encapsulated, where the artificial pressure was coming from. So what he said to me was very simple. He said, my Jewish grandmother said to me, Arnold Klugman, he said, there's only two things that happen in the world, the things you can control and the things you can't control. He said, so here's the deal. If you can control it, don't worry. You can control it. He said, that might be a very small list of things. He said, but you don't have to worry about those. And then he said, if you can't control it, hey, guess what? The outcome's not your deal. Don't worry about the outcome. Don't worry about, if you can't control it, the outcome's going to be what the outcome's going to be. Then you just do the next thing that's called for. But yeah, so if I can't control it, don't worry because I can't control it. And he said, yeah, he said, that's it. There's no real good reason to worry other than our grandparents taught us how to do that, except for my brilliant grandmother. And I said, boy, I'd like to meet her. He said, well, it's not possible. She passed away in 1971. So he said, that's why I get to tell you all of these sayings that came from my grandmother, whether they did or they won't. You can't go verify it with anyone. I just loved him for some of his freeing kind of advice that he gave. And he always used to say, look, I'm always going to give you a rope. It's your choice whether you're going to make a noose or a rope ladder out of it, He said, work on the rope ladder first. Don't make the noose. Chikata ganai. Let go of what you can't control. How many of us is that true, especially this time of year? Stress in buying presents and, worrying about the perfect food for Christmas dinner or Hanukkah celebration. And how many people are just in that mode of, I'm at peace. I'm watching folks go crazy, especially in our 9-month Black Friday celebration.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's really great value in obviously what we've been talking about. And I think that, yeah, I just think it all makes, there's so much. I remember the thing that I always use because, and that's, that's the weather because, it's just like, I remember, um, it might have been for, I don't know what event we were planning, but it was like a big event. And just sitting there going, oh my gosh, what's the weather going to be like or whatever. And then you can't control it. Like, you know what I mean? Is you maybe have a plan that says, okay, if it's, if you need it not to rain, if it rains, this is what we're going to do. And if it doesn't rain, we're going to do this. So you're not caught off guard and and scrambling at the end kind of thing. And there's like There's plan A and plan B, but basically, you can't control it. So you really have to, like, unless you, you really got to let it go.
Yeah. Pretty interesting.
And that was always very easy for me to kind of adopt and kind of think about it that way because it was very clear that you couldn't grow. And then just kind of, okay, well, like, we'll kind of extend it out a little bit and realize that, okay, you know, there's most of life we can't control.
Yes. Yes. There are some things that just require, we've had these little word battles with between accept and surrender and all of that. But there is a going limpness about it. So to have peace, you got to bring peace, right? Peace isn't something that automatically happens. And we all know times in our life where it was just constant upset to the point where you can hardly think, or hardly hear yourself thinking. So the the whole idea of deciding that peace is a construct. How do you have a peaceful construct? That is by looking at areas in your life that you've made really super significant and deciding, yeah, they're important. However, I'm a long way off, from having this be determined whether or not success is going to happen. So maybe, just maybe, it might be okay if I just take on each day, like, am I making progress? And I always loved that sign that used to be in my French class. There was a sign that said "Ici on parle français," okay, which means here we speak French. And then it said, "Progrès uh, ne ne pas perfection," okay, which means progress, not perfection. That's how you learn the language. I mean, it's really kind of how you do any big thing, right? A bunch of little things.
Hmm.
Along those lines, I smile and I laugh. We learned the audio lingual method for speaking French. We actually had a lab, and we went in and we put on headphones, and we're the first generation to do it this way. And it said, "Écoutez et répétez." Okay. Bonjour Jean, comment vas-tu? And so people would say it out loud. You could hear them. Bonjour, John. Come on about you. It's really quite comical because most of life is us thinking that we sound more like the recorded voice than we really do. So,
But one of the
uh,
things, and I think of, because peace is like peace, and everybody, like, it almost sounds passive. Like, there's some sort of like element where, oh, I'm just going to be peaceful, kind of thing. And then you realize that peace is really like an action word. It's really, there's there's an active, like, to me, I actively seek, I actively do, for me, to reach peace. Like, practices I do. It's an action that I do to reach that state of peace. And if I'm not actively doing something, it's an active way of navigating life. It's an action of looking for the extraordinary in the ordinary. Like, all these different things, but I'm taking action for like, to get to a state. So it's not like I do nothing, basically. I mean, there is, like, I can meditate and I can get to a state of peace, but it's an active form of meditation. So, you know,
a
it's like,
decision that you made to meditate about that. Yes.
right, exactly. It's not like, well, I'll just hope I'm peaceful.
Yeah. And then while you're on your way to hoping you're peaceful, then you're really all stressed out because it ain't happening.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I can't meditate. I hear that a lot. I'm a bad meditator.
Yeah. I'm always left with the Three Stooges, when Curly says, trying to think, but nothing's happening. Very, very cool. So then the last one, you're going to like this one especially, and it's called Omiari or Omoyari. And that is being considerate of others. Gentleness makes life lighter for everyone. Kindness is a quiet strength. So all of these things have to do with generating peace from the inside out, not seeking peace out there somewhere, but through your way of being, through your behavior, through your active thinking and action, you are actually generating peace. You're generating peace in your own life, and you're also generating a little bit of an oasis of peace for the folks around you. But then the really, really neat thing about this number 5 is I hear be considerate louder than be considerate of others, because you got to start with yourself. Your consideration has got to be very, very, see the joke, feel the disconnect between the lofty goals and where you think you're going to be, and it doesn't work out that way, as opposed to being devastated by this new insurmountable chasm between where you are and where you want to be. Just be considerate, and then that consideration, you can focus on others, but make sure it's an all-inclusive, considerate behavior that includes you in it at the core.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a huge realization for me recently when I was doing some reflection for a program on my values and what my values are or whatever. And I would think, I would say that kindness is probably one of my primary values. Um, and all of a sudden, like, there was this realization, like this, like, little light bulb that went off above my head.
Yes.
That meant that all of a sudden I realized I'm really kind in the world. Like, I'm really, but it is not always self-directed. And all of a sudden I thought, oh, like there was this huge thing that, like when I say kindness is a value, like why don't I include myself in that value? Like why do I not include it? It's not like I intentionally don't include, like you're not included, you're not supposed to be, but it's almost like I forget to be kind to myself. And I thought about it. And so that's been my whole, like, for my goal for the, I don't want to say goal, but for my intention for the new year, my word for the year is acceptance and radical acceptance. And that's acceptance of like what's happening outside. It's allowing for myself,
Right.
all that I am. But in that, you have to have compassion and kindness to yourself because, there are parts of yourself that, everybody has parts of themselves you wish you could basically dissect out, like, it's like, I wish I didn't have that one area. That's the problem area right there.
Interesting. Well, so the coach in me always hears people asking the why questions and say, maybe you need a better question. And all the other, objective questions that you can ask, like who, what, when, where, and how, none of them require an answer. All of them require inquiry. Why requires an answer. And when you get the answer, you're done. That's it. For some people, it's why do I behave this way? I know exactly why, because I'm a butthole, and I am just not a good person by nature. And so that's never going to be me. And now their whole way of being is to support that. And I am who I am, and I'm not changing for anybody, Okay, that's pretty cool. How's that working out for you?
Right.
So I think the neat thing is that when you start shifting from why am I this way to what's present or what's missing in my life that would make a difference for me in this area, where it's no longer looking for a feature that is built into you, but it's now something that you can go look for a cause that is not you. That now you can just say, this is my behavior, in response to this cause that I believe is there. And on closer scrutiny, I'm finding out the cause really isn't there. I'm behaving as if it is because I really couldn't stand myself if it were. So, or whatever else whatever else you come up with through your inquiry. But
Yeah, either that or there is most likely a direct origin in a lot of cases.
yep,
And most of the time, those don't apply anymore because they were something that happened in the past that we responded to.
right.
And, I mean, I think that that's quite common because there's so much that happens in, formative years, whatever, of development or whatever. And then all of a sudden we're like, we create different personas or aspects about ourselves based on, you know, what we experienced. And the thing is that we have something similar that happens, or some word happens, or we're with someone and they say something, they look a certain way, they act a certain way, they smell a certain way. And all of a sudden we're down that path of when we were 5 years old. And, and we were embarrassed
Yeah.
by something, or we were, and so I think that, it's just not that you have to live in that space. It's just sometimes kind of an interesting inquiry into realizing, okay. And, for me, it's like, but that's not now.
Yeah. I like what you're saying, and when you point it,
Now. That's not now. That's not happening now. It's like to remind myself, this is not that same experience that happened, 50 years ago.
well, see, that's really the neat thing. Whenever we talk about ourselves as if we are fixed, like a rock is a rock. I mean, that rock is that rock until somebody acts on it and changes what it looks like, right? I mean, you can break it up, make it into pebbles and what have you, but we're not like the rock. We're a lot more like the cake that's getting ready to go into the oven. And if you cook it long enough, it's going to be a really successful outcome. So I guess what I really try to get people to take a look at is, where in your life are your descriptive sentences about yourself subjective? Which means there's no way of verifying, if they are accurate or true. And how can you start to look at what's missing in your life, or what's causing things to happen in your life, from a perspective of being objective? As what can we describe in color, math, dimension, all that sort of thing? What can you say that is objectively true? If it's a subjective statement about yourself, the things that are conversational in nature are not correctable by conversation or anything else. They have to be worn out and lose all of their juice naturally by being interested in other things, or what have you. You just can't go around, regretting the loss of your grandmother for your entire life the way it was acute for you for weeks when it actually happened. So you have to, in order to survive, go on to other things. That's a completely subjective feeling. The impact of it, the degree that you're grieving and are upset, or in some cases, maybe it has an upside where it gives you great access to memories you'd forgotten about. But if there's something you are looking to change, which is how we got onto this, are we trying to just stop and be different the next day? Or are we looking for those little small things that we can do over a period of time that objectively say that when you do these things, sometimes people have success? So for instance, when we aren't happy with how much we weigh, or we're not happy with how much weight we can lift, what do? We follow someone else's program, right? That's objective. we're hoping that they've got objective statistics that basically say people that follow these steps will have somewhere in the range of these results, but your mileage may vary because not all people, perform exactly the same way. But if it's subjective, no, I'm just fat. I always have been and I always will be. Not much going to happen with that, except for it's going to be a badge that you wear and you either beat people with it or you use it to get sympathy from them. But I can tell you, as somebody who has been in situations that I really thought were unchangeable, they were conversational. They were not, this is what's so, and it's written on a stone tablet somewhere and cannot be changed for love nor money.
Mm-hmm.
So the who, what, when, and where, and how, those 5, they kind of give you at least a starting point to gain access to something that might be objective. And then using the terms what's present or what's missing, that if it were otherwise, it might make a difference. Let's look and see if there's some of those kinds of things that are going on in our present, as opposed to being perpetually flawed as a human being and you were never intended by God since the beginning of time to ever have these things in your life. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I do find that people are more successful with accomplishment if they can take on a way of looking at the world through less subjective, this is how it is, and more subjective of let's just see what forces are at work here that I have to become better at in order for me to have some kind of say-so as to how this turns out. I mean, for instance, who do you have to be to do 1,000 experiments on a filament? Let's just say that's true. Now, that's either a guy that can't stand being wrong or is so committed to proving an idea that he recognizes that if he does anything long enough, he'll be successful at it.
Well, I think a lot of what we're talking about is we're talking about, to me, behavior and mindset changes. And part of the reason if I go back to what I said is sometimes we have to realize where it came from, because I think we have to, for me, it brings in an element of understanding for myself on this was created within myself, like whatever it was, it was a response
Right,
to something, but it was created probably a long time ago.
right.
And understanding that, and I've done it now since then for a long period of time, let's say.
Yes.
Like, let's say I've done it a million trillion times since that original circumstance or incident. And so, not saying that you keep on working at it little by little by little, but you also have this element of understanding of like, well, you've been doing this for the last like 40 years. You've had this reaction. And also being okay that you might have the reaction. Let's say, and in a way, I read I think I shared it with you, a wonderful article about, by Tara Brach, and she was talking about acceptance, and she was talking about like, there's certain things that happen, which we like, let's say, and I use this because I have a friend whose sisters suck. And so she has to accept, I mean, that's a fact. Like she, you know what I mean? Her sister's ill. So she's not like, as much as she doesn't want it to be happening, it's happening. But on the other hand, she talks about holding space for the part of yourself that wishes it was different.
And not making it bad and wrong, right?
Right. And not making it bad and wrong, that it has this, like it's allowed to be there. Like you have every right to wish it wasn't happening.
Right.
And I think that when we are when we're trying to change something, we have to have that kind of attitude of like, we're going to, because so much of it is almost like a reflex. It's like a way of thinking. And you think to yourself, you have the thought in your head, which you're trying not to have. And it just pops in. It's almost like you can't control it. And going and berating yourself or whatever, or getting very overly critical of yourself for having that thought serves no purpose. Except to most of the time make you feel worse.
And make you right about the fact that you're a skunk as a human being,
That's right. Exactly. You feel worse and you're like, oh gosh, I'm useless. Here,
And
here I go again. But is to allow yourself to have the thought and say, okay, well, I had that thought again. And almost like, now as I'm trying to do this self-acceptance, self-kindness thing, when I'm not, I'm like, I'm just getting lots of like when things go wrong, I'm just like I said the other day, just getting my Mary Jane corrected me on something. And I just said, it's like, I'm sorry I'm correcting you again. I said, it gives me more opportunity to practice being
yeah,
myself. I said, it's just another time I get to say, okay, I get to practice.
I love that. I've I've taken all of these things in life that are little challenges and I call them performance opportunities. Let's see what I'm made of today in this area, So that's gotten me through a whole lot of test taking in the last 6 months. But what's really remarkable about our conversation that I love so much, our whole premise of empowerment is how do people that are stressed find peace in their life? I mean, we've been talking about 5 years, and these 5 ancient Japanese rules that make life peaceful are not just they're not just a good thing to think about or know. They're actually the kinds of things that you can strategize and you can give yourselves a set of desirable behaviors and you can notice when you're doing it. You can give yourself a sentence that basically says, I can panic, but maybe just not this time, you know, or what I don't resist doesn't tend to persist. So how about I accept it? How about I try a new behavior that hasn't been here before? Oh, that's not working. Maybe I can come up with something else. I'm a pretty smart guy, not smart in all areas, but I'm willing to admit I don't know everything. Now let's go and see what else there is to know about this. Hey, ChatGPT, can you tell me where it says anywhere in the world that I was destined to be a jerk my entire life? Or is there a couple of things that I can do to kind of buff that up a little bit? Well, Bill, it's about time you asked. You're starting to come around. I don't know is really a wonderful thing to say in life. It gives you an opening, where you can choose to be, that ignorance is bliss and I refuse to be made unhappy. Well, please don't use it as kind of a tonic for dulling life's highs and lows. If you were to just use it as an interrupter, I don't know. Now it's a good time to come up with a question. What would be an appropriate question for right now? We've talked about that so many times.
When I think of the word like I don't know that I always think that to me that's one of the most liberating phrases.
Yeah.
And I have to thank someone who basically I remember being really nervous, which I still get nervous about giving presentations and stuff. But I remember a friend of mine saying it's okay to say you don't know.
Right.
And I remember thinking to myself, and it was like it was like, oh, okay, I can take a deep breath now, because there was so much, I was putting so much pressure on the fact that I had to quote unquote know it. And then it was just like, okay.
The fun part of it is you made it up. You don't need to know anything. The rest of the world doesn't care. As a matter of fact, they don't give a good rap if you ever know. But you got to admit, we're pretty sure that it's written down somewhere and immutable and irrefutable, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So guess what? We're somewhere close to where we normally wrap. Just wondering if you have any other thoughts or any kind of nice little holiday bows that you can put on or care to.
Not really. I just, I'm reminded of like don't sweat the small stuff
Right.
as we move into the holidays and people do get very tense
Yes.
on the way things turn out, and see if you can really just, recognize what's important, the small little things,
Yes.
and let that be your little experimental guide and just see how that works out for you. It's like,
Mhm. I love that saying. There's actually a book that says, "Don't sweat the small stuff," and it's all small stuff.
all small stuff, exactly.
So there's a whole lot of different ways that you can remind yourself that there are no virtual handcuffs designed for you to be in every day of your life being miserable. And answering the question why ain't going to get you far down the road. Asking the question of how or what's missing or what's present maybe can get you to be a little bit more contemplative, a little more thoughtful of yourself. Maybe buy you just a little bit of room where you now can consider the possibility of doing something differently. Not better, but maybe something that's more natural, maybe something that's got more ease associated with it and gets you to the same place, by the way. So I'm looking at my calendar. We have a real scarce amount of 2025 left. We are running out of 2025 as we speak. And I, for one, there are some things that I will take into 2026, but there are also some things that I will endeavor to leave where they belong in 2025. Not everything gets to come along. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree.
But I think one of the things that I really feel a profound relationship to is the notion of gratitude and acknowledging gratitude that I've kind of, I think, gotten a little bit of a different relationship with in the last, 11 and 3/4 months. And I'm definitely taking that into 2026. And one of the things I'm most thankful for is your wonderful friendship, your openness, your willingness to include me in your life. Um, and I really do feel like, when I say I love you to someone, it's not romantic love as much as it is I completely am moved and I love how I feel when I think about being with you.
Uh,
You provide that opportunity for me to bring that space into my life. I'm very thankful for that.
thank you, Bill. Well, you're welcome. And thank you. And if I were to take anything, I think it is this whole, like, this whole aspect of self-compassion um, and acceptance, because I think it's those moments. And when I say that was what I decided was going to be my word, I think about all the different things that had happened over the year where I've had time to practice and what led to that kind of like, even the realization, the awareness of it. And then just saying, oh my gosh, like, and I think that that's when we start to, if you do any sort of self reflection, however you want to call it, quiet time, self reflection, whatever, I think that's what I'll take with me into the new year. There is a lot of stuff that there's a number of things I'm going to leave behind. Um, but that I definitely will carry with me. Um, because, as we mentioned, when you're kind to yourself, there's a different level of kindness to other people.
Yeah, just being mindful of there is kindness that's possible and noticing when it's present and noticing when it's missing.
Mm-hmm. And then, not to be, and I'm not saying that every time I was kind, there was an ulterior motive or there was an agenda. But I think then I think what then you start to examine is, where is that kindness coming from? Like, is it people pleasing? Is it, fear? Like, what is your mindset and your emotions around that? So, and I guess I can't say that my aspect of being kind now is really truly because I feel like that's the only way we're going to change the world, is being kind. Mm.
I love that. And anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
So what I want to leave everybody with before we give you our standard invitation is I want you to consider bringing this into your life. Have a reason to wake up. Purpose gives life direction and joy. Even small meaning creates big peace. Accept imperfection. Beauty lives in the flawed and unfinished. Perfectionism destroys happiness. Improve a little bit every day. Tiny progress becomes transformation, and consistency beats intensity. Let go of what you can't control. Acceptance reduces suffering instantly. Some things must be released, not solved. And finally, be considerate of others. Gentleness makes life lighter for everyone. Kindness is a quiet strength. Try this on and see if you can't develop some practices in your life that allow you to have just a little bit more peace in your life and a little bit more that you can share with the people that you love. I think with that said, Jan, would you like to give the invitation?
Sure. And just during the next few weeks, take a moment to check in with people. Everybody handles the holidays differently. Maybe go down and just reach out and tell someone how much they matter to you. That if they need you, that you're there for them. Send a few people messages every day, or, no pressure, but just if somebody enters your mind, to me, if they pops in, there's a reason they pop in. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I guess this is that part where I say, we are lighting the candle, a world that works. We love all of you, and we want your lives to be an expression of who you are in the world and what really works about you. And by the way, if you want to go out and live your best life and then come back and tell us all about it, that'll be pretty good. Thank you, Jan. All right. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.